Hello and welcome to DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by your other hosts, Riley Fessler. How are you today, Riley?
Just swell.
Just swell. And I hope also just swell is Minna Stein. How are you, Minna?
Equally as well.
Equally as swell. I'm swollen myself. Um, is that what that? No, that's not what you meant, I guess. Well,
That's what I meant.
that's
It's not what I meant.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I'm retaining water. What? No, it's not. I'm not. All right, Minna, what's your first story?
Hezbollah has vowed to retaliate against Israel after explosions from detonated pagers in southern Lebanon killed 9 and injured nearly 3,000, including its fighters and Iran's envoy. Lebanese officials condemned the blast as Israeli aggression, while experts expressed skepticism about an imminent full-scale war, despite ongoing tensions. The pagers, used for communication by Hezbollah, were reportedly rigged with explosives detonated remotely. The U.S. denied involvement and called for diplomatic efforts to prevent further instability in the region.
A few things to say about this. One, of course, it's incredibly reckless to do something like this if it could trigger war. The tensions on the northern border are very high right now. And some people say, well, the Israelis did this semi subtle thing because they wanted to strike back, but they didn't want to start a war. But, having 3,000 victims is not subtle. And the reports out of Beirut yesterday were of real chaos throughout the city because it affected so many people. Secondly, uh, you know, there's a tendency when you hear a story like this to go, oh, the Mossad, they're back at it. They're kind of world class. This is cool. They, according to one story, injected a chemical into the batteries in the pagers, which they intercepted in their supply chain and then passed along on to Hezbollah, who distributed them, and then, Israel was able to detonate them from afar by sending a signal to all the pagers. Uh, that's technologically kind of interesting, although from a technological point of view, I would like to say that I didn't even know that anybody used pagers anymore. But having said that, um, it's also, and some people have made this point, a war crime to attack people randomly. And, so when you hit a button and you don't know who's going to be affected by the explosions, and it could be children or other people, you don't know where these things are going to be. That's, inappropriate. Now, they were attacking a terrorist group, so, I understand what the Israeli response to all of that would be. But it's a significant story that takes an unstable situation and makes it even less stable. Riley?
The FBI and the U.S. Postal Department are investigating suspicious packages sent to election officials in 17 states, which reportedly contained an unknown substance. Despite the investigation, there have been no reported injuries, and officials in some states have already determined that the substances were harmless. The packages were mailed to various state officials amid increasing threats and warnings of political violence as the presidential election approaches. The sender identified themselves as the U.S. Traitor Elimination Army, and state officials such as Michigan's Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson have noted a rise in threats against election officials. The incident follows previous occurrences of suspicious mail sent to election offices last year.
It would be irresponsible to speculate on which right wing terrorist was behind this. Oh, I guess in the way I just said that, I speculated. But we know how these things turn out. We know who are likely behind these things. It doesn't matter really towards the core point, which is we're at a very precarious moment in terms of political violence in the United States as well. And this is why I wrote in my Daily Beast piece that was published yesterday that I think the worst political violence of campaign 2024 is ahead of us. It's not going to be the assassination attempts. It's going to be building on the tensions that have been stoked by Trump and by Vance and by others who are promoting an argument that the left is behind the assassination attempts on them, that the deep state is trying to suppress them, and also promoting an argument that's fundamentally racist, which they do in all things. Riley, there was a racist story that took place on the Hill yesterday from a Republican, wasn't there?
Yeah, this story, honestly, I mean, not much shocks anymore, but this one's kind of still even surprised me, where it was a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on hate crimes, and Senator John Kennedy was questioning the Arab American activist Maya Berry, implying that she supported Hamas and Hezbollah, despite the fact that she repeatedly said that she did not support those groups. He continued to say, you can't say that you don't support these groups, despite the fact that she just had. And it ended with him telling her that she should hide her head in a bag, which resulted in gasps and yells from the audience. So it was just a shocking exchange and clearly racist. There's no way to twist that that's not racist, in my opinion.
No, it is racist, and it's the calling card now of an entire party. I mean, if you doubt it, ask yourself how many Republicans have stood up and said that the racist slurs of Trump and Vance with regard to Haitian immigrants were wrong. How many have stood up? None. And that's why we are where we are as a country, because an entire political party has embraced hate as a centerpiece of their political campaign. It's a form of stochastic terrorism. It destabilizes our society. And that's why, and again, read between the lines here, folks. That's why you have Russian trolls and foreign actors amplifying the messages of hate on social media. Why? Because it serves their purpose, which is weakening the United States. Why would anybody vote for a political party that Russia believes will weaken the United States? It's crazy. It's like, taking a poison pill. Minute.
The House is set to vote on a government funding plan by Speaker Mike Johnson, which seeks to extend funding at current levels for 6 months, while including a measure on voter registration citizenship requirements. However, the proposal lacks sufficient Republican support and faces opposition from Democrats, making its passage unlikely. With the shutdown deadline looming on September 30th, many lawmakers prefer a shorter 3-month extension to allow for further negotiations after the upcoming election.
Yeah, well, that's one interpretation. The other interpretation is the interpretation of Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, which is doing a shutdown right now would be political suicide for the Republicans because they would be blamed for it. So they will do a short extension. They'll talk this big game, but they will do a short extension because they're already in trouble. And this is just going to put them into more trouble. As for this rider on the bill that says that you have to be a citizen to be a voter in the United States, Minna, what's the problem with that rider?
You already have to be a citizen.
You already have to be a citizen. It's ridiculous. This is just ridiculous that you have to be a citizen. It's like in Arizona, where they've tried to pass a thing where you need to prove your citizenship instead of using your driver's license as proof of citizenship, when in order to get a driver's license, you have to prove your citizenship. I mean, cuckoo. They are just trying to create layers. Why? Because they want fair voting? No, they want to make it harder for people to vote. It's all based on an assertion, which is also untrue, that somehow non-citizens vote in U.S. elections. There are almost no cases of that happening.
It
Riley.
was making
Oh,
me
sorry.
wonder. Well, while I was pulling this story, I was wondering, like, I know historically Congress gets blamed for a government shutdown, but I was wondering if the government does shut down, if Congress will be blamed for it or if Biden is going to get blamed for it.
No, Biden is not going to get blamed for
You
it.
don't think
Half of
so?
America doesn't even remember Biden as president anymore. But secondly, government shutdowns are so much part of the Republican playbook. And it's very easy for the Democrats to point out why they're voting against this ridiculous rider. And I just don't see that as the outcome. I mean, look, don't take my word for it. Take Mitch McConnell's word for it. If he thinks it would be political suicide for the Republicans, that probably means it would be political suicide for the Republicans. Riley?
The Federal Reserve is set to cut its benchmark interest rate for the first time in over 4 years, a move aimed at reducing borrowing costs for consumers and businesses ahead of the presidential election. However, uncertainty surrounds the magnitude of the cut, with analysts speculating between a quarter point and a half point reduction. The decision comes as inflation has moderated significantly, dropping from a peak of 9.1% in June of 2022 to 2.5% recently, prompting Fed officials to focus on supporting a weakening job market while avoiding a recession. Despite rising unemployment, driven by new workers entering the job market, many economists believe that the Fed's forthcoming cuts will stimulate economic growth without reigniting inflation.
Right, because the cuts would be small enough to produce what they're trying to produce, which is lowering inflation without some kind of economic damage being done, also known as a soft landing. What seems more likely is a small reduction now and another small reduction in a couple of months. This is good news for home buyers who will have lower mortgages. It's good news for all borrowers. And it's another sign of the recovery of the United States economy, where Trump was planning to run on this central issue of inflation, um, but the inflation has all but gone away. He was going to run on a bad economy, but the stock market has hit new highs. Even the softening job growth there's a lot of job growth going on. There's a lot of new investment flowing into the United States. The economic conditions, candidly, could hardly be better for the Democrats from now through the election. Not to say people won't complain about economic conditions from the past couple of years, but right now, all the trend lines are pointing in a direction that aids Democrats more than it aids Republicans. Minute.
Polls indicate a close race between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, with Harris leading nationally by nearly 3 points. Despite this, electoral forecasts suggest Trump has a higher chance of winning the Electoral College at 56.2% compared to Harris's 43.5%. A recent USA Today
Who does
and
this woman work for, Riley? Is she like the RFK?
she's a
Is
double
she a
agent
plant?
for
She's a double agent?
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I am.
where is she getting this data? The past couple days, the polling has indicated Harris's lead has grown since the debate. Almost every poll has shown her lead up 1 to 2 points. There was a poll yesterday that showed her up 7 points. The average lead she has in all of the polls is 3 to 4 points when you take out the Republican polls. But Minna, who is a Republican operative obviously, is zeroing in on some, sort of marginal people, or her friend,
There it
out
is.
well, hold on, out there, your fanboy, for an organization that's owned by Peter Thiel, that's running polls that you can't trust anymore. But even your buddy out there, Nate Silver, has said it's 50-50 now, where he said the election was actually trending um, towards Trump. Of course, this 50-50 is part of this likelihood predictor that they do, which is complete BS. No, I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead, Minna. Finish your story.
A recent USA Today poll, which is where I found this story, shows Harris leading by 3 points in Pennsylvania and enjoying a more favorable view amongst voters there. Additionally, Harris has seen a significant turnaround in support among young Hispanic and Black voters, while betting markets now favor her to win in November, marking a dramatic shift from Trump's earlier dominance in odds. So it had a happy ending.
Yeah, yeah, happy ending. Yeah, but meanwhile, people were sitting there slitting their wrists because you started with all this negative, misleading news from polls like Rasmussen and Trafalgar and all these kind of nutty places that do this stuff. If you want,
I
yeah,
listened to Nate Silver. He's the one who got me interested in polling. I was in high school reading 538. So whenever Nate Silver has something to say, I usually perk my ears up and listen.
Riley, were you reading Nate Silver in high school? Like what's going on? What's going on in America's high
school? I did for my government class in high school. I did look at 538.
I don't think I don't even know if my high school taught government. I mean, government was fairly new when I was in high school. But the I think we had gym and something else. There weren't
lunch.
Lunch, exactly. Study halls.
Yeah, we had an AP U.S. government.
Oh yeah. Well, this was before the proliferation of AP. I remember taking one of my daughters to a college interview at a school she ultimately went to. And she walked into the room, and there were some other students waiting around. And this guy walked up to her and said, "Hi, I took 15 AP courses." That was his opening gambit.
Oh boy!
And it was like, oh my God, it's truly crazy out there. But folks, we're gonna redeem Minna. She seems like a perfectly nice person on the surface, and the fact that she has, was reading Nate Silver in high school is probably a sign of interest in politics. And Nate Silver was not completely corrupted by his sponsors back then.
That's true. He was not.
Or his obsession with sports gambling, which is another. Do you do that on the side, Minna? Are you a sports gambler?
I don't, but he still wrote about sports back then. Yeah. Sports statistics.
Yeah. Well, he was kind of into that stuff.
It was a different era of Nate Silver, but I still am interested in what he's doing.
Yeah. Right. The many eras of Nate Silver, but. Folks, here's the point. You got to look at trend lines. Trend lines are favoring Harris right now. You've got to look at the underlying hard data, as we've talked about in our political show with the one we did with Tom Bonnier the other day, where registrations are up, donations are up, volunteering is up, all the measures of enthusiasm are up. And you see these as encouraging signs. And then what you do is you take all of this data and you put it in an envelope and you seal it and you put it in your desk drawer and forget about it. Because the real thing to do right now for the next 47 days or whatever it is work to get the candidate you prefer elected. And not believe the polls. Don't let up. That's how trends are maintained. And that's really what the focus is going to have to be. But right now, trends are pretty good. And Friday, early voting starts in, I think, Virginia. It starts in some places on Friday. So we're in it, folks. From now on, we are in this race that will determine whether the United States remains a country in which we all want to live, or whether DSR goes to Plan B and starts broadcasting from a small pirate vessel off the coast as a pirate radio station. Riley is a mariner has many years of experience sailing in the ocean off of Ohio.
Down the Ohio River and in Lake Erie.
Yeah.
And we've already trademarked the name Deep Sea Radio, so it's going to be fine.
Yeah. He ran a ship going up and down the Cuyahoga. Isn't the Cuyahoga River in Ohio?
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It sure is.
Yeah, no, I don't know much about Ohio, but I like to throw in the.
Like to pretend.
I drove very near Dayton, Ohio this weekend.
Wow.
Very near, because I drove to Michigan, and you go up around on the Ohio Turnpike. And I want to say something before we go about Ohio.
Riley. Oh, no.
No, I want to say something positive about Ohio. Because Ohio's a terrible state. and it's incredibly boring geographically, flat as can be. A lot of it is really ugly.
We're not starting out so positive.
Well, I'm waiting for the butt here.
I understand. And Ohio State's in Ohio, which of course, my wife went to Michigan, so I guess, we'll set that all aside for the moment. But Ohio has one thing that's better than any other state in the United States.
Uh-huh.
The rest stops on the Ohio Turnpike.
True, that's true. Ohio rest stops are really good, actually.
They're really good. They're clean. They got everything that you want. It's pleasant to stop there. Pennsylvania has no rest stops to speak of. And it's big. Pennsylvania, driving across Pennsylvania is not a stack. It is hard to do.
Road trips get significantly worse as soon as you leave Ohio because there's no rest stops, and the ones that there are suck. So
unless you're at the Joe Biden Welcome Center in Delaware, which I was at very recently, I made my friends stop so I could go, and it was pretty nice.
It's not a bad one. The nice thing about the Joe Biden Welcome Center, and we should do a whole podcast devoted to rest stops and American highways. But the nice thing about the Joe Biden Welcome Center is there's a little Starbucks there that's sort of freestanding.
Yeah.
Off on its own, kind of cleaner than the rest of the rest stop, which is not so great. 95, the rest stops are not fabulous. Let's be honest about that.
Can we do a DSR special in the vein of like Top Gear or the Grand Tour, where we visit each state's best rest stop and we rate them?
You can certainly do that, Riley. You can keep calling in, and you could do every day from a different rest stop.
I'll have an RV. It'll be awesome.
There used to be in the 1930s, there were these radio shows. This is before my time, by the way, Minna. I don't want you to think that I was around in the 1930s.
I thought you made the radio shows.
I did when I invented radio, but with Marconi. But no, there were these radio shows that would come from like the restaurants of big hotels in New York or whatever. And, there would be a breakfast show, and the guy would be there. Hi, I'm here in the restaurant of the blah, blah, blah hotel. Oh, and who's walking by? Well, why don't you sit down and join us for a conversation? And I've always thought that would be really good to do from the Four Seasons Hotel restaurant in Washington, D.C., which is kind of like the company cafeteria of Washington. And everybody goes through there, and you could just have them come by. They sit at the table. They talk for a little bit. Another friend of ours suggested a good place to do a podcast would be on the Excella between Washington and New York. Because you see everybody ultimately on the Excella between Washington and New York.
Or we could do it at the Joe Biden Welcome Center.
That's
or the Rayburn Steak and Shake.
Where's what? There's a Steak and Shake?
Yeah. One of the I don't know if it's the Rayburn, but one of the house office buildings, I think, has a Steak and Shake, or at least it did back when I worked on the Hill.
Wow. That's pretty. Yeah, we could do it in that little railroad that runs from the house.
Oh, that would be sweet.
Yeah,
the little railroad is so fun.
You enjoyed that when you were?
Yeah, it was awesome. I took a picture when I got to ride it.
Everybody does, because it's the only place where there's a little railroad. Because
it's
you
awesome.
wouldn't want the members of Congress to have to walk a block.
Too old to walk a block.
And they're always with their constituents on that thing going, hey, come on, the little railroad.
It's pretty cute.
It's ridiculous.
They should sell little conductor hats that you can wear while you're on the little railroad.
This is Riley's Thomas the Tank Engine child coming to kick in, where Riley is of the generation of kids that thinks Ringo Starr is famous because he was once a tiny conductor.
My gosh, I just saw Ringo Starr last night, ironically.
Where did you see him?
At the Anthem in DC.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm. And I did talk about Thomas the Train while I was there with my dad.
Yeah, I'm sure your dad was. I mean, Ringo Starr must be 82 years old.
He's 84.
Oh, my God.
And he was absolutely killing it. He had to take one break. Totally understandable. And otherwise, he was jumping, he was singing, he played drums on every song. Like, he was killing it. I was happy for him. Like, I hope I'm like that when I'm 84, jumping and singing and playing drums.
Yeah. Well, have you seen Mick Jagger? Like, he's 82 or something like that. And he like moves around on the stage like he moved before.
Yeah.
I mean, his face looks like the Crypt Keeper, but the rest of him looks kind of like Mick Jagger. How did we get here? We were talking about serious stuff, and people are listening. What's going on here?
For the 3 remaining listeners, thank you for sticking with us.
Thank you for sticking with us, and we do try to touch upon cultural issues, and I'm glad we did here, because it sure is better than the TV I watched last night, which included the 1930s classic starring Charles Boyer and Hedy Lamarr, Algiers. On TCM, which is really where I get my main relaxation these days, watching old movies on TCM. Anyway, folks, that's the news plus some other stuff. That's what you get here at the DSR Daily Doom Scroll. And hope you will join us again tomorrow for more of it. And hopefully the news will be good. Until then, bye-bye.